everybody. Welcome to Globant, to our offices in Buenos Aires. I am really happy, and we are really happy to be here today to share this ConvergeX with you. I'm Wanda Weiger, Chief Brand Officer at Globant. So ConvergeX, we have been doing these events for 6 years or more, and it's a space where we are eager to share new ideas, new trends, new technologies. We gather leaders from different backgrounds, different industries to share their views on how the future will look like. Today, we are gathered here to talk about AI. You know, AI is revolutionizing everything. We have been seeing exponential growth coming from new tools, new developments, and now we have a special leader that is going to be joining us today. At Globant, we have also been focusing and leading the AI conversation for over 8 years when we launched our AI studio. We have been training our people, we have been certifying our bots, and we have been developing new tools like Augur, Magnify, and Genexus that are helping organizations worldwide to achieve their AI transformation. So I'm now happy to introduce our speakers. We will have a fireside chat that we will be led by Martín Migoya, our CEO and co-founder. Martín is well, of course, he founded Globant 20 years ago with 3 friends. Welcome, Martín. In 2003, and now, 20 years after, we are 25,000 employees and Glovers, as we like to call them, worldwide. We are in 25 countries around the world, working for leading organizations like Disney, Google, Electronic Arts, and more, helping them to create new digital experiences. And of course, I would love to warmly welcome Thomas Dohmke, the CEO of Github. Hi, Thomas. Hi. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Thomas has been responsible for leading the company's strategic vision and driving growth and innovation across the platform. Github is one of the leading companies developing tools that is changing how we do software. You heard they recently launched Copilot X, and we will have the chance to hear directly about this from him. Of course, I know that many of you or some of you may have questions, so we will launch the fireside chat, but then we will leave 15 minutes to do some Q&A session. So get ready and start working on your questions and be prepared to answer them. Yes, of course, I will sending them to you. And before, I will leave you to them, but before we do that, we have a 1-minute video that I would like to share with you about Copilot. So thank you.
I hate the music. And I told as such my team before we launched this, and my team was like, you're the only one who doesn't like it. And it sounds like for old people. And they're like, no, you're wrong. Everybody loves the music. And I'm like, okay, I disagree and commit. Leaders can also disagree and commit. And they were right. Everybody loves the video. And they got me a T-shirt that says, I hate disco.
I hate disco. Oh, it's so funny. Thank you very much for being here today. And thank you everyone for being here today. It's great for us to have the opportunity to have a chat with you, Tom. And I believe that you are the CEO of one of the coolest things that has happened in the history of developing. So first, congrats for that. And the second question, and it would be like a one-on-one, what are you doing here in Buenos Aires?
Yeah.
It's so amazing to have you. So
is the coolest thing in history GitHub or Copilot?
Whatever, both of them.
I came here down to South America to speak at Web Summit in Rio, which happened last week. As I was invited there to be on main stage, and we did a speech actually about AI and how it improves developer productivity. And I actually built an app in 15 minutes. Feel free to watch it later. And then I thought, well, if I'm down here already, and Brazil is the third largest market for us after the United States, outside the United States, so it's China, India, and then Brazil. And the fastest growing country in South America is Argentina. So I thought, oh, I've never been to Argentina, fastest growing country for us in South America. And I came here to Buenos Aires, and I must say it's a beautiful city. I love it here. I love meeting all the developers. We had a lot of fun yesterday at the university, and I would love to come back.
Amazing. So thank you for the visit. And you know, Copilot and GitHub are two things that has been very popular, as I said before. And everything that is happening with AI these days is really amazing. So it would be great to hear from you which are like the next things that are coming, or which is like your long-term vision for the product, for the platform, for everything that you are building at GitHub.
Our long-term vision ultimately is to make developers more happy. As weird as that may sound, you know, we believe that is the key ingredient for many companies to actually achieve more value, to create more products. And I mean, you're the CEO of Globant. I'm sure your backlogs are endless, and every time you ask one of your developers and how long it will take to build something, you scratch your head and think like, oh, when I was a developer, I could have done that in 1 week, and now it takes 1 year. And I believe, you know, part of the reason for that is that we do so many things as developers these days. In fact, if you look at data on the internet, you see that most developers only code 2 to 4 hours a day. But they get paid 8 hours a day, and it's not because they're gaming all afternoon. It's because they have so many other tasks to do. They have meetings, obviously they chat in tools like Teams or Slack. They do DevOps, you know, they have to update the servers, find vulnerabilities, or ultimately now be on a call, on live site, on call for a live site incident, solving, debugging a problem, and often that takes way more time than we thought it would take. And so how do we use these, you know, 2 to 4 hours where developers are actually creative? For me, it's mostly in the morning when I wake up and had a fresh cup of coffee that I want to build something, and how do I use that time most effectively? So if you ask me what is my vision, you know, what's next for Copilot, well, it's how do we use these 2 to 4 hours even more effectively? How can we enable developers to build more, to ultimately, you know, manage more lines of code than ever in the same amount of time? Our lifetime is limited, our work time is limited, so we have to figure out how we can use that time in the most efficient way.
And let's talk very, you know, precisely about, you know, Copilot. And you know, you just launched Copilot X. Which are the next things that you see coming, you know, on the platform soon?
Yeah, so if you haven't seen Copilot,
if you can release them, I mean, if you cannot release them, I'm fine. But
that's fine. I always think, you know, while it's the irony of GitHub that it is not an open source company itself, while it is the home of open source, I think we can talk about most of the things we are doing, and there's not much secrets within GitHub. And so if you haven't seen Copilot, as the product is today, when you type in your editor, it auto-completes, and it not only auto-completes the next line, it can actually auto-complete whole methods, boilerplate code, unit tests, complex algorithms, and it's really useful. It writes about half the code on average in those files where it's enabled. And what do we add next? Well, as part of Copilot X, we have announced chat, which effectively brings ChatGPT into the editor. And so instead of just typing in your editor and adding an auto-completion, you can now ask questions in chat. And it's similar to ChatGPT. The magical moment is not the first question and answer. That you can do in a search engine, right? You search for something and often gives you directly the answer below the search field. The magical piece is the second question and the third question, where it knows what you asked before, it knows what you have open in your editor, in the terminal, what error message you might have seen, and it can interact with you, and it feels very human to have those conversations, and you can say, what is wrong with this code? In fact, we have a demo that shows how you use that with a SQL injection. So, you know, code scanning finds a SQL injection, and then you can ask, okay, tell me more, what is actually a SQL injection? And then the coolest question, I think, is how could an attacker exploit that code, which really gives developers a much deeper understanding of how these security vulnerabilities actually work. How does an attacker actually do this when they try to attack my code? And then, of course, you can ask Copilot Chat to fix the issue for you. And there's many other such examples where this interactivity between the developer and the chat is creating tremendous productivity improvements. I must say, for me as a CEO, I rarely have time to code anymore. But when I have an hour on my Saturday morning, I just bring up Copilot Chat and I start coding.
That's amazing. A few weeks ago, I was trying to solve something for some books that my father wrote, and I was trying to create a chat that was specifically tuned to have a chat on those books, right? And I started using several things. I started using ChatGPT, and ChatGPT started to guide me. After 2 days of programming, I ended up saying, well, this is not working. It's not doing anything of what I expected to do. And then I called one of the Globant guys, and he said, Martin, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, all this wrong. Everything was wrong, except for certain concepts that were right. And the big problem was two things. First, ChatGPT did not understand exactly what I was trying to do. Me neither, and that was the problem. And the second thing we found out that in certain places hallucination happened, and code that didn't exist happened. And normally when that happens, you can blame someone, but this time I was not able to blame anyone. So the main question here is how we will get that confidence in the results, as we all know that these are algorithms and neurons with certain weights. Normally content will come and you don't know if the content is right or wrong. How we will handle those things in the future? How we will create confidence? How we will create that kind of connection between the solution and the problem in the future?
Well, I would say, the first thing I have to say is we still need a pilot. Right? That's why we call it Copilot, because there still needs to be a pilot, and the pilot is ultimately the one that is in charge. And so what do you do when you're the pilot and you think your Copilot is wrong? Well, you tell the Copilot that they might be wrong, or you tell ChatGPT. And I actually think those are some of the best moments when you get an answer from ChatGPT and you scratch your head and you're like, that doesn't sound right, and you just tell it that your answer is wrong, and then it says, oh, I apologize, here's a better answer, and basically you get into an interaction model where you explore the problem space and kind of like try to figure out what could be the right answer, or what is the range of right answers, because often there is no real true answer, and it really depends on what you're building. But I also must say, that is a scenario that developers are super used to. When you try to find solutions about your problem in code, for example, on Stack Overflow, there's often wrong answers as well, not because somebody had bad intentions of writing a wrong answer, but again, because they either misunderstood the problem, or they didn't understand the problem you're having, or ultimately, maybe it's an old answer and the solution has changed. We often see this, for example, in mobile, where things that used to be true for iPhone development are no longer true.
Yeah, and I was thinking on something that you mentioned, open source. And as opposed to what happened during the Google era, in which we had that PageRank algorithm that nobody knew. Now, the secret sauce of everything that is happening on artificial intelligence, we may argue that is the data set, but are the transformers. And the transformers are kind of open these days. Basically, anyone can use transformers. As we evolve in the future, we have seen during these days like a big question around who's going to win the race, on the AI space, and which is the role of open source in this new era in which AI is picking up like crazy, and how you see the future of open source solutions competing with the monsters like the Copilot or whatever solution is out there.
Yeah, in tech we always have this notion of a zero-sum game where we always want to have a winner. And then it turns out that actually is almost never true. You know, who has won, Apple or Google in Android versus iOS? I don't think you can say that today, and you can certainly not predict what's going to happen in the future. You know, for a long time it looked like Windows is the absolute winner in operating systems, and now we have Windows and we have macOS and we have iOS and then we have Android, and you know, ultimately we have now AI operating systems, if you will, as the browser, and ChatGPT in itself might become a platform. So I don't think, you know, that zero-sum understanding that we always have in our heads doesn't actually exist and is meaningful. It might help, you know, to us as CEOs to motivate our employees to identify clearly who's the enemy, and so we can kind of like focus on the competitor more than on the customer. But ultimately, I think the customer will decide of what is the use case
Correct.
that is solved by a model. And so coming back, you know, to your question of is it the open source space or is it the, you know, OpenAI and Anthropic and other other AI company space that keep their model
or
to
Google
a certain
or
degree
whatever.
secret. And I think it's going to be a mix of both. And what's happening? Is that fire alarm?
Fire alarm. It won't go fast. Well, for those that are listening to us, we are having a fire alarm, so I don't know what's gonna do. Let's wait for a second.
Well, there's always a first.
Let's wait for a second. Guys, you can chat now. You can check your WhatsApp, and maybe we need to run, but I don't know. No, it looks like we're fine. It looks like we're fine. We're fine? Okay, good. Thank you so much.
For those that couldn't see the video, there was a fire marshal there that gave us the thumbs up.
It was very unique for an interview, being interrupted by a fire alarm.
Yeah.
So
you
clearly this thing is on fire.
Yeah.
This
They heard me say too many competitors' names.
Someone clicked the emergency button.
Open source. We were talking about open source and closed source model, obviously, and I think they will, as always in our software space, play a complementary role, and you will have both. And at times, you know, the OpenAI will set the standard and move ahead with the innovation that they're building, and in other times, you know, open source models will innovate. And we saw this clearly last year. You know, over the summer we had Midjourney and Stable Diffusion that was dominated the narrative for quite some time. And then ChatGPT came and basically brought it back to OpenAI, setting you know, the tone of the conversation. And I'm sure we will see more of that this year. And I'm sure we will see use cases on both sides of the aisle that complement each other. And you know, if you think about something like Llama that you can run locally, and I'm sure there will be even smaller models that might run even on your smartphone. And you're on an airplane where you don't have inference with the cloud, that might be incredibly useful, because I think, you know, we're going to be so used to using AI for everything we do that at times when we don't have it available to us, we are almost, I don't want to say helpless because that creates a negative connotation, but we are going to be not as productive as we want to be.
Correct. Now, look, there's another thing that, another question I had for you, which is, we at Globant, we have been, you know, researching a lot on AI, and we, as we were talking before this meeting, this talk, we developed Augur, which is our platform to understand the spaghetti in corporations, which is different from using Augur, which is the last. Augur would be the last mile. This is a little bit upstream in terms of the solution, helping you navigate the complexity of millions of lines of code that has been written in 10 years or 20 years, whatever. Like in Globant, 20 years. So we have code from 20 years now. So my question is, how you see the future of these AI applications and very specific solutions like Augur. Augur is helping spaghettis. Copilot is helping the specific, you know, productivity of the developers for certain specific things. And then, do you see the future as a massive AI tool that will help pretty much all the specific knowledge, you know, spaces, or you see the future as very specific oriented, you know, solutions for solving certain problems in different parts of the company or in different moments of your life?
Yeah, predicting the future is always great because maybe we meet next year again and you tell me how wrong I was about my predictions. I think, I believe...
Maybe in the next 15 minutes, not next year.
That could also happen.
Everything changes so fast.
I think, that we will see AI in every part of our life, whether it's personal or professional. It will support every tool we use will have some kind of AI agent. Everything we do in life will be supported by AI. And obviously, we're still in charge. So if you don't want it, don't use it. It's the easiest in VS Code to just disable Copilot for an hour if you just want to be left alone and don't like the suggestions you're getting. But if you tone it down to the developer lifecycle, we will see AI in all phases of that lifecycle, whether it's analyzing code, what Augur does, whether it's writing code in VS Code and GitHub Copilot. We will have an AI agent and pull requests, and it's super useful in international companies like we both have, where people are in different time zones, in different locations, and then you send a pull request and now you wait, right? You wait for somebody else to review your code, and that's often annoying because you have the chance, if you get the review in 20 minutes, then you will just keep working on this problem and get it into production. But if the review doesn't happen for the next 3 hours, you have to switch to a different task, right? So it is actually very distracting to even have that, wait period and not knowing where it will land. And so we will have a Copilot in the pull request that will review your code and give you ideas of what you could fix or what the human that ultimately still should do the code review might tell you, and then you can fix those things ahead of time. And similarly, you can imagine that I push some new version of React to repository, and then my coworkers get a notification in their Copilot saying, "Hey, Thomas, updated React, and I refactored already here these 3 files of code, and here's what you can learn for the next task that you have to tackle." And so there's many such scenarios where AI will support the whole developer lifecycle, but it will go further. It will go really in every part of our business. The example I really like is Microsoft has announced Teams Premium, which will bring a Copilot into the Teams chat. And so after a meeting, you get all your action items for the next meeting or for the time between this meeting and the next meeting. Now you can envision, in the future, it will not only show you the action item, it will actually create GitHub issues. And then as a developer, I get out of my stand-up and I go into my editor, and now you can say, what's my next task? And it pulls that information from GitHub issues and shows me how to solve that problem. And might even say, can you generate a pull request just from this issue without me writing any code? And if it's a really simple refactoring as an example, it might just do this and might actually then combine, Augur as technology with Copilot as a technology. Another example, that I always hear whenever I meet with any bank around the world is that they have COBOL running from 1965 on a mainframe. And 1965 has been almost 60 years ago, so hopefully, fingers crossed, the people that wrote that code no longer work in those banks because they're in their 80s. But what do you now do with that code where the original authors are gone? There wasn't really unit testing in the 60s. Mainframes are expensive, and you're in a regulatory environment, so you can't just rebuild everything from scratch because it's super expensive and takes forever. Well, you will be able to use AI and you will analyze that code. You will have test generation for that COBOL code, and you can actually run that for days, right? You don't have to finish within 100 milliseconds to have a test case. You can run it for days until the model has reasoned with itself, or maybe even with a second model, until it gets to a point where it has a full unit test suite, and then generates a Python a digital twin, if you will, to that original COBOL code. I think that's scenarios that we're all going to see in collaboration between employees in a company and within the developer's lifecycle specifically.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And indeed, to your point, what I'm seeing, my question was oriented to the idea that what I'm seeing is that every single company, no matter, for example, at Globant, one of the largest tasks we have is to match, people and skills with certain specific projects. And how to do that task has been like a tremendous, an amazing and very big job, that we need to carry every day to understand what's happening. Now, AI is helping us. Just by the way, we just released Geno, which is an app for Slack to help you connect between, it's a beta still, but help you connect between people and open positions. Which is really amazing, by the way. Just a small announcement, by the way. So I'm seeing that every single company in the planet is using this for helping us to achieve new things, helping them to achieve new things. By the way, just launched, and invite you to participate, a worldwide contest in which you can submit your AI application, an idea. After we got the training of ChatGPT, we all understood how it works. So you can submit, and you can win almost $200,000 in prizes for participating on the contest of how to use AI in the most creative way.
Okay.
And we launched it a few weeks ago. It's killing it. I mean, we are receiving submissions from pretty much all over the world, so it's really amazing. So next question is about productivity. We were discussing about that before we started. I believe right now, the additional productivity that we are getting with tools like Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever tool you are using to accelerate is being devoted to the pets. Basically, developers are having a much better work-life balance than before.
Oh, the
right?
pets. Yeah.
So the pets, the pets. So number one question is how you see that evolving.
Yeah.
And number two question is, we have seen, economists measure something called productivity in the economy, right? And we have not seen since the internet a massive increase on productivity.
Yeah.
Now, my conclusion, personal conclusion, is to say, okay, basically all that amazing things about technology increase our quality of life, right? And now we live much better than before. We can get easily communicated. We can get now our job done much easier. So how you see that, efficiency going, where you see that efficiency going, or if you see that this new technology is really changing the efficiency measured by, the economy people, the efficiency changing, right? Do you get the question, or do I need to rephrase?
I strongly believe that the developers are ultimately creators. They use creativity to build something, and it's really hard to truly measure productivity of an artist or of a musician. If you create things, no matter how much time you have during a day, you're only going to achieve so much until you're kind of running out of your creative energy. And so that's number one. I think there's a certain limitation of how much you can choose out of a person before nothing will flow, no matter what you do. I think we're also, early in the journey of AI and how we leverage it. Similar, to the early days of open source. And, in the late 90s when Linux became popular and the GNU compiler and other things, we didn't really see those same productivity gains. We saw kind of like on the horizon what may change to how we build software. And now fast forward to 2023. 90% of most projects are built on top of open source. And 90% of the code base of those projects are also open source. I'm pretty sure nobody at Globant is starting a project and the first thing they do is build an operating system and a compiler and a programming language and an editor, right? You're using all the stuff that's available on the shelf, and then you're pulling in React, and that gets 1,000 dependencies into the project right away, and then within a day you can have a full web page, a full web application up and running. That was impossible in the early 90s or even in the early 2000s. So we got the productivity gains, and we know it because everybody is using open source. The free market, wouldn't be doing that if it wouldn't have increased their productivity. And I think AI is on that same journey, and that's kind of like my third point. I think it's that we have already optimized the 90% with open source, so we're really only talking about 10% that we are still building ourselves. And we're seeing in our telemetry that 46% on average of the code is written by Copilot, where Copilot is enabled. For Java, it's 61% or 62%, something like that. And you could, explain that that's probably because of all the boilerplate in Java, all the try-catch statements, all the import statements on top of the file. There's a lot of, things that you write in Java that you don't have to write in other languages. And we see in case studies, we compared developers with Copilot and without Copilot, and we saw that by them solving a standard task, those with Copilot were 55% faster and had a higher success rate. Now, obviously, those case studies are always a bit of a clean room exercise. In real life, things are sometimes harder than they seem or than they have to be. But I truly think, we are going to see those productivity gains ultimately flow back into the growth of our companies and our projects, our ideas. As long as we have more ideas in the backlog.
And do you think ambition will be higher?
I think ambition will be higher, but I also think if you're not distracted all the time, and if you're not, like take your next vacation as an example. Now, you might have a personal assistant and you just tell her where you want to go. But no, or even better, then you go to an airline page and you pick, the from date and the to date, and then you go to the hotel and pick the same dates again, and then you go to the rental car company and pick the same dates again. How stupid is that, right? But it's because each of these has created their own landing page with a different user interface where you fill in the same details, and then you fill in your name and your wife's name and your kids' names and so on. In the future, you're going to tell an agent that you want to take the same trip as every spring break, and you won't even have to say when spring break is, because that's public information.
This is not,
this is so not you're using AI you're using AI for your happiness, because then you have more time to actually enjoy your life.
No, what I'm saying is you're using exactly the same example I've been using during the last 6 or 7 years, while I was trying to explain to OTAs, which is the next phase of their life. Forget about the idea of putting the dates and putting the cities and whatever. I have a business trip to Madrid next Monday, period. And all the rest needs to come. And that was my pitch to several OTAs, some of them here in Argentina and some of them in other countries. They never get it. Now they're being trained and in this new technology, ChatGPT, and now they're all getting it. And in the same way, banking. For many, many years, indeed, we have a patent around semantic banking. And we were saying banks should not have a page where you have a menu and like a Yahoo-like menu. You need to have a Google-like menu, like saying, okay, just a text box, pay my Visa, or, which is the balance of this, tell me my balance, and which are the next 5 things that will be due. And those things,
you don't even want to go to the bank homepage to begin with. You just open up your agent and say, pay the Visa that you have with that bank.
With my phone. Indeed, it should be one step deeper. It should go into WhatsApp, saying, hey, pay my Visa. That's it, into a phone number. We have been pitching that for many, many years. But now I think those things are a reality. But let's go to another topic, which I think is, you were talking about productivity. If you are a senior engineer or an advanced engineer in every kind of category, it looks fine. But when you are a young engineer, when you're just starting, I think it's even more, I would say, even more important. It's even, that helps you to go much faster and to get trained. So how is your perspective on that?
I think it will make life for junior engineers so much more easy, especially with the chat functionality. Like when I don't know if any junior engineers are in the room, but when you join when you join a company or you join a new team or you join a new project, the problem you always have is that you have to figure out how things work, right? How do we do things in the project? What base image do we use in our containers? How do I write unit tests with which framework? And so what do you do in those projects is you find another engineer that can answer your questions. And at some point that other engineer gets annoyed, or they might not even get annoyed. You might just fear that they might get annoyed, and so you stop asking and you try to figure it out yourself. And the same is true if you're the new kid in class. The same is true if the teacher explains a concept to you and you don't understand it. How often do you really raise the question? I'm like, here, I'm the kid that hasn't understood it. I have 16 more questions. Kids don't do that, and employees don't do that either, and team members don't do it. They shut up and they try to waste their own time to figure it out themselves. And in the near-term future, they're just going to ask the chat agent, the Copilot chat, the Teams chat, or whatever is available to them to find that out. In fact, with auto-completion, when you write a Docker file, it might just, auto-complete automatically all the things that the standard engineering system is of your company. And so I think, many junior engineers will, ramp up much more quickly in a project. And by the way, it's not only junior engineers, it's any engineer jumping to a new project. Especially as you work with many dependencies and projects across any large company, you always have to figure out, there's a bug in this other library, so I have 2 options. I can complain to somebody, or I can just go and fix it myself, right? We call that inner source. But then you try to fix it and you realize, this is way too hard and I can't get the unit tests running and I don't want to ask them and I want to send an email, so I just abort and go back to complaining. And so I think, we will just get much better collaboration within companies, within open source projects, and absolutely within education. I know a professor from Duke University that is now requiring Copilot for the next semester. Every student has to do Copilot, because imagine you're the professor and you're in a, whatever, 5th semester course. You either assume that everybody learned exactly the same from 1st to 4th semester, which we know is not true. I never went to university on Fridays because, I enjoyed 4-day weekends. You figure out for the other days I didn't go to university. But, A, that's not true. Not every student learns at the same speed. I mean, if you're a parent, you always tell yourself kids are all different, right? And we know it's true, and then the education system still expects our kids to learn exactly the same by 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and so on, semester or grade. And so using a tool like Copilot lets you, as a professor, as a teacher, ensure that they all can ask all the questions that they don't understand and basically bring themselves to the same level.
Correct. Let's talk about data sets, copyright. And the other day I was reading Twitter and I saw a very angry developer saying, this answer that GitHub, or not Copilot, or no, it wasn't Copilot, it was ChatGPT is giving, is my answer that I wrote on Stack Overflow. I will never, ever again write my answer on Stack Overflow and collaborate. I think there's a lot happening around who owns that information. Of course, before you were able to go into Stack Overflow and check for the question in any way, but you would give the ownership of the answer to the one that is the only thing that he was trying to chase. So my question is, which is the future of data sets? How would you connect data sets with the owners of that information, with the creators of that information? And is there any possible ecosystem that you will create around that to train the models that finally will end up answering Copilot or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at GitHub today, obviously GitHub opens a public data set, which is all the public repositories on GitHub. They are accessible to anyone who wants to use those. And in fact, Hugging Face and others have, created a project called BigCode that provides such a data set of open source projects, and others have done. That's how open source model have been trained. And so I think there's going to be an increasing trend of different kinds of data sets. There's also an increasing trend or a spectrum of perspectives of what is fair use and what isn't fair use. And ultimately, it's the lawmakers and the governments of our countries, and hopefully all of them together and not all of them individually, trying to figure it out and creating the right policies around these topics. We at GitHub, we believe there's technical solutions that can help with these issues. GitHub Copilot has a feature built in that whenever the model is suggesting code that's more than 150 characters, we compare that suggestion with all public code on GitHub, regardless of what license that code has. And if we find a match, we will not show you the suggestion. And so that way, you're not inadvertently reproducing code that already exists on Copilot, regardless of what the license is. And you could, make the argument that's in a way already better than what many humans do. And we know, from many examples that many of us have. I mean, I have done it. Copied code from Stack Overflow or from some GitHub repo, 10 lines of code. Didn't think too much about it. And we are previewing now a feature with selected customers where instead of blocking the suggestion, we're actually showing you the match. So you can see the match. This code from the model matches this code on a GitHub repo. That might not just be run repo, but 20 repos. And we show you all the licenses. And so you can do what developers do. You make your own judgment call. And maybe you look at the code and it's quicksort. And you're like, yeah, this is not... this is so trivial, I can get away with this. Or it's FizzBuzz or prime number detection. Or you look at this and say, oh, this is cool, and it's under the MIT license, and I just add the attribution to my code snippet. Or you move on and and ask Copilot for another suggestion, or write your own version of that for that problem.
Now, I would suggest to our audience that start thinking about ideas. I will make one more question, and then I will allow you to make your own. So, the main topic that these days is happening is around AI and everything that it will kill, millions of jobs and things like that, which are pretty pessimistic, I would say. You know, from 1 to 10, which is the level of hype that I know this technology is absolutely, you know, a reinventing technology. I mean, something it will change a lot of things, how we did it in the past, how we are doing it today. It's kind of internet, right? It's when internet hit, when you are younger than me, but when the internet hit, you know, our lives, everything changed, but not that much. And then we figured out that we were able to do the same things as before, but faster. And it's like this is, I normally compare, you know, this kind of AI, ChatGPT, generative models with a calculator. So when my father was doing calculus with sliding rule, and then he got a calculator, he didn't disappear. Basically, he kept on going and doing more efficient things. But I would say that these days, this conversation is like in every single room. And my question is, how being inside Microsoft, being in the center of everything that is happening right now and inside GitHub, what's your perspective in terms of how much hype it is, from 1 to 10?
Let's say 6.
Okay.
I think, you know, the hype reminds me a bit of what I would call the App Store gold rush in 2008 and 2009, where all kinds of apps, you know, appeared in the App Store that had a half-time of maybe, you know, 3 to 6 months and then disappeared. I won't call out any names, but, you know, there were some that were funny and others were very shallow tip calculators, as an example. And I think we have a bit of that right now, where we have a hype and a lot of startups creating very shallow layers on top of GPT-3 or now GPT-4 that probably won't find a sustainable business model with just a shallow layer. But that is always the case in the startup ecosystem, that you start with a very simple idea, try to find product market fit, and then grow that idea into something much bigger. You know, 1993, Mosaic, and then Netscape came out, and then it took until 1998 until Jeff Bezos started selling books on the internet. And you could have made the same argument back then, books on the internet, how long is that going to survive? And clearly, you know, Amazon has won a significant part of the e-commerce market in the industry. So it's always tricky to talk about differentiation if you don't understand the whole vision that the founder has and what they're taking as the first step. But there's certainly a degree of hype that we're seeing in the startup ecosystem, where people are building a lot of ideas that are not going to be survivable. But ultimately, I think we are already at a stage with Copilot and a number of other tools that have shown such high productivity gains that I don't believe this is going to go away, and we are not going to move back to a world without these assistants. We are only going to have more of these and adopt more of these going forward.
Interesting. Okay, let's open up for questions. So if you have any question, that would be lovely. Okay.
Hi. It's on? You? Hola, hola. Ahí está. Hi, Thomas. Hi, Martín. Thank you for the chat. I'm Julian from Ámbito Financiero. You were talking just now about concerns that people have now that the topic is so much in the mainstream. I think about now everything is happening in Hollywood between scriptwriters and producers that are explaining their concerns about it. What do you think from your side as creators of these AI apps? There's a job for you in bridging the gap between these different parts that have concerns, for explaining, for bridging the gap between those concerns, or is that something that is for education, and if it's your responsibility, in which way you think you can bridge that gap?
Absolutely, I absolutely think this is part of our responsibility as, you know, GitHub, and GitHub is part of Microsoft. Microsoft has been talking about responsible AI and Microsoft responsibility in responsible AI for a long time. And you can actually, you know, find a homepage on Bing or Google if you want to, about Microsoft's AI principles and how we are approaching the topic, you know, making sure the models are ethical, making sure, you know, they're treating everybody in a fair fashion, or to take an example from Copilot, filtering security vulnerabilities out of the suggestions. That's actually a feature that we announced a few months ago. So instead of suggesting code to you that has a SQL injection or cross-site scripting in it, we filter that out, and you get better code by Copilot than you may have written yourself. So we consider that part of our responsibility to build AI in a way that it complements, that it co-pilots the pilot. And we have policy efforts. I spoke in Brussels in February about the European AI Act, and as GitHub have always put it in our mission, on the things that we do of supporting open source developers. And I think open source developers should be excluded or should have a carve out in many of the regulations, because if you're a single developer working on a cool project, you're never going to afford all the compliance departments that big companies have, and compliance and privacy guidelines in a way benefit the large companies, because for them it's just more work for the lawyers, and they hurt small startups and open source communities, because for them it's really hard to follow up, and especially if regulation is different between the European Union, LATAM and North America as an example. And so we are fighting, for the rights of open source developers, and we're treating the responsible use of AI as part of our core mission.
Thank you. Perdón. Dale.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Mi nombre es Adrián Moreno, para iProfesional y ProApp. Mi pregunta básicamente es para vos, Martín, primero. Quisiera preguntarte, la inteligencia artificial vino para democratizar de alguna manera todos los ámbitos y las cosas y empoderarnos. Una de las maneras recientes que hemos visto es a través de la creación con Bizarrap en cuanto a poder democratizar la música y generar de alguna manera más espacio colaborativo con distintas maneras de comunicarnos a través de la música. ¿Cómo podría beneficiarnos la inteligencia artificial para los que crean contenido, sean influencers o puedan desarrollar su contenido para vender sus productos en algún negocio tan pequeño como tal vez en San Telmo, en el conurbano o en alguna provincia argentina?
That's a great question. I should answer it in English. I'm sorry, but we are streaming in English, so I will answer in English. The question was about how to use AI to accelerate creativity, to accelerate the way people sell things in any corner in the country or in the continent. So I would say that AI is something that will be everywhere. And the good news is that we all got a free training financed by ChatGPT in the last 6 months that was dreamed. I mean, anything that is happening today was impossible to be explained 7 months ago, right? 6-7 months ago, it was impossible to explain everything that is happening right now at a speed that is ridiculous. But right now, everything learned how to use those things to do creativity, to accelerate the way we sell things, to accelerate the way we explain things. And I think that's something that is really remarkable. The amount of friction that has been erased from the creation of specifications, descriptions, any kind of, even images that can be created right now that before was absolutely impossible, is really amazing. So I don't see this replacing. I see this accelerating the way humans interact. I see this as accelerating the way humans create and doing it without the friction that we had before. Right? Before, the amount of things that we needed to do and learn to produce the same content. I mean, I had a friend that is selling small pieces of jewelry, and to sell those pieces of jewelry, before she was doing a huge effort trying to describe those pieces of jewelry. Now they are being beautifully described at ChatGPT in an amount of seconds, right? So, I mean, it's much easier. So everybody will be able to do things that before were absolutely more difficult to do. So I see this as a life-changing technology, though I don't see this replacing people, because if you don't have the context, if you don't have the specific environment introduced into Copilot or into ChatGPT or into any AI tool, I mean, it's the same thing as having the most intelligent person in the planet. let's pick 20 people, the smartest people on Earth, and we put them in a room, and we don't provide context, and we pretend them to solve one problem we have, which is very easy. They won't know. they wouldn't know. And AI is exactly like that. If you don't provide the right context, which is a human thing that cannot be replaced by anyone else, then the answer is wrong. So I believe humans will need to teach and will need to learn how to do better context than before. And indeed, in my humble opinion, this is something we need to teach to our boys and to our kids.
Yep.
We need to teach them how to provide better context to AI than before, how to create a text, but create the main ideas of the text, which is, by the way, the most difficult part, and then to convert that into text will be like using the calculator to make a sum, an addition, or a division. So I hope that answers your question, but if you want to add into that, it would be great.
I think your example about images was great, and you used it to, say that AI will generate, the description of the image. But we all know we need to provide accessible web pages. So every image actually has this alt tag, right? Like we have to kind of like in a short and PowerPoint presentations needed and emails needed. Well, not only can you use AI to generate the alt tags, you can also envision that in the future somebody that has vision impairment doesn't even need the alt tag anymore. They will just use AI to get described what they see on the screen. So instead of kind of like designing a web page where everything is done for a screen reader, the user that has a vision impairment, that has accessibility issues, can use AI to see what's on the screen. It's a bit like Geordie LaForge and Star Trek Next Generation, right? You might even have a visor, on your face that talks into your ear. Similarly, I'm sure there's going to be a world where we just put our AirPods in our ears and you can talk Spanish and I can talk German, and in your ears it sounds like I'm talking with my voice in Spanish, and in my head it sounds like you're talking German, like the universal translator. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. We already see like the initial stages of that.
Yeah, by the way, AI already cut almost half of my work for the next earnings call because it will be a digital twin of myself.
Really?
And all the text, I wrote the whole text, and then the whole text will be, reproduced by digital.
So next year we're not on
I will
stage
be answering.
here.
No, I will be answering questions. That guy, I would not be able to replace that one. But anyway, no, and indeed, I think a big use of AI for me, okay, chatting is great, suggesting, creating stuff is great. Now, transacting is much better. And I think transactions are the next things that are coming into the AI space. By the way, there's a project, I'm sure Microsoft has something too, but I got to know that Google, this is a public thing, I'm not releasing anything of my specific knowledge. Google has a team of about 160 engineers in a project called Maggie. And in that project, what they are doing is they're trying to transact from the text, I need a ticket for Monday to Madrid, boom, here's a ticket. I mean, nothing, no questions asked in the middle, hopefully. So that's I think is another space where we should pay a lot of attention in terms of, Copilot and everything.
Hopefully it doesn't put you in like 32E or something.
Yeah, well.
Middle seat.
It depends on how much you want to pay. It depends on how much you want to pay. Anyway.
Hi.
I think we'll take
Hi,
the
Thomas.
last one.
How are you doing? Just a quick question. We span many different industries, and sometimes you have specific challenges on industries. Yes, gaming has a lot of tool sets that are specifically built for the industry. What are your plans in expanding GitHub and Copilot as an idea into these other industries that have their own challenges about IP protection, for example, and things like that?
Yeah, I have nothing to announce today, but obviously there's concepts in artificial intelligence, Gen AI, with these large language models. You can train your own models. It's very expensive, especially if you want to retain the large part of the large language model. You ultimately have to invest a lot of money. If you look at GPT-4, today it's becoming multimodal, and you can have images and text at the same time. So that goes already a bit in that same direction. There's a startup that I really like in the United States called Runway ML, where you can write your own little scripts and it renders a video for you. So that's also going in that direction. It has nothing to do with coding, but obviously for computer games you need more than just code. You need a lot of animations or little videos. And then, there's tuning a model. So you take the trained model and you tune it for your own use cases. And then there's something called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, where you, instead of modifying the model, you're inserting more data into the prompt, into the context, as Martin said earlier. And so I think that is probably the path for many of those scenarios where you add additional context into the prompt that lets the model, which is ultimately a reasoning engine, answer the question, even though it never had that information when it was trained. And I'm getting signs I need to cut off, so.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Thomas, it has been a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for, during your visit, visiting us here at our new auditorium. It's the second presentation we're doing in this place, so we're extremely happy to receive you here. It has been a great conversation, and looking forward to keep doing things together. And I hope all the developments, and as leaders of our organizations, will have a duty, which is the duty of using this technology every day in a more responsible manner. And I believe on that we have had our AI manifesto, and we have been, very strict to that AI manifesto, saying which are the things we're going to do, which are the things we won't do. And those things for me are extremely important. And I strive, and I think that as leaders, you, I, myself, and pretty much all the people that are leading these technologies, around the world, is extremely important, and more than ever we pay attention to that. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for all of you, to all of you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Thomas. It was a wonderful and very enriching conversation. So we are wrapping up this Convergex, but before we finish, I wanted to invite you. One of the next things that we are going to do with GitHub is a code challenge that we are going to have on June 10th. We are inviting developers and members of the IT community to join us. We are going to be developing AI tools together during a whole day. So we invite you all to register and be part of this. We are going to be working with Copilot, testing the tools. So you are all invited. And thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Seriously, what's happening with AI? The AI revolution has disrupted every single fiber of our world. Feels like reality has finally surpassed science fiction. So, is it the worst of times, or maybe the best time ever? Challenges can be scary, yes, but we are not afraid. We are builders, geeks, tech optimists. We create really awesome things. Apps, games, tons of software. To order pizza or to detect cancer. Software here, software there. Tech has no limits, so let's have fun with it. Join us in the AI Codefest to create, collaborate, and innovate using AI. You will have the chance to win up to $50,000 US. What are you waiting for? Come on, register now.